Tell you what, they're adding up, John. They really are. Whew.
Very
Had some
true.
good conversations this weekend, actually, with somebody who's talking to us on this whole matter. So we're going to get somewhere pretty soon here, it looks like. Pretty excited.
Looking forward to that. It's some exciting news, folks. And you guys are all part of it. So thank you for being part of the Rebel's Edge. We do it 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, take Friday off for travel. I'll actually be traveling today, Pete, out to LA for the LD micro conference. But after this show, Jared is handling the bulls and bears that you might see popping up on the screen, the odd noises you might hear other than Pete burping or something like that. By the way, Jared, I sent you that one of that llama or whatever the hell that is. Goat. We got to use that one of these days.
We'll get it. We don't have it today.
That is one of the funniest things, Pete.
But
anyway, I know you guys are partially tuned in for fun, but mostly tuned in so we can break down some interesting parts of the trading day. So let's get started. Macro minute, Pete. I'm going to say today our macro minute is that millions of Americans are back to paying off their student loans because they got a break during the pandemic. That break stopped September 1st. They started charging interest again. And today they have to start paying, or they're in arrears, as they say in the banking parlance. And that is going to be interesting to see whether that saps some of the strength of the consumer, Pete.
Yeah, I think that will be interesting, John. On the other side of that, I'd like to just focus on the fact that we went into the weekend worried about a shutdown, right? I mean, that was a lot of concern for a lot of people, a lot of angst, let me tell you, you and I already knew this, and I said this on Friday and Thursday. They're going to kick the can, man. They're going to push it out, and they did. And now it's all the way out to what, November 17th, I think, John, before they actually make the next decision to kick it further if they have to. So, I think that was pretty macro because that was a bit of a save. I think that would have caused the market to have a little bit more of a jump or fall or drop or whatever based upon that. But because they were able to kick that can, now it's back to, well, the Dow's down maybe 100, NASDAQ's up maybe 50 or 60, and that's the market we're in.
Yeah, and I'm shocked, Pete, that the market's up a little with the 10-year moving back towards 4.7.
Yeah.
But let's look at fantastic futures, shall we?
Fantastic futures.
I could have said the 10-year, Pete, but we talk about it so much. And yes, it's up another 2% today. And that's not 2 whole percent. That's 2% of a 4.6% instrument. But instead, I'm going to say silver, because silver just getting smacked. Down 3.5%. You know, it's down 12% in a month, Pete. So I thought that would be an interesting, fantastic future.
Yeah, I like that one. I'm not going to go to the 2 and the 10-year either, John, because we have hit it day after day after day for all the right reasons. But I'm going to move it in a different direction. How about something that's finally starting to gather a little bit, maybe, and that's wheat. Now, wheat is down. Year to date, the stock or the wheat options are down about 30%, 29%. But today, getting a pretty nice little bit of a boost to the upside. And I think a lot of that having to do with some of the commentary from somebody who really does know a lot about these various commodities. But the reality is this. Russia, there's still a lot going on there, John. We've got a lot of drought issues still here in the U.S. A lot of folks were starting to look past a lot of these things. That's why they were selling, thinking the supply would be good. It looks to me like maybe they were jumping the gun a little bit. And that's why we're seeing a pretty substantial move to the upside today in wheat.
That's the fantastic futures for today, folks. The first trading day in October. Let's jump on some of these stocks and or big movers like Bitcoin, Pete, because Bitcoin is up about $1,200. That's 4.6%. Now, host of reasons. Number one, we're going to be making our currency worth less. How's that? Well, because we're adding to debt. like day after day after day. We told you how fast we added $1 trillion in debt, which is, why we're up against the debt ceiling, and we had to go through that craziness on Saturday. But this is a thing, Pete, that causes a whole bunch of digital assets like Marathon and Riot and so forth to move. And guess what? We had pretty good unusual activity in those. I mean, you look at these two folks, there's Riot Blockchain, and Marathon Digital. And just last week, we had both of them for unusual activity. How's that looking with the stock up 7% of each of those two, Pete?
And we were coming back, John. We actually had a couple of folks here at Market Rebellion who jumped on some of those unusual option trades because that's what they're here for. And very, very, very pleased. We're talking about 100+% returns for some of these guys. So, depending on where you bought it, all the rest of it. But in the case of the folks that were actually getting back to us, I'd also point out today, we're actually seeing even some option paper in Coinbase to the upside, going right at where it is right there, right around $80. So that's another one. The idea of potential ETFs and everything else, there's a lot of things that are kind of backing up and making a little bit of a move, I think, right now for crypto, John, as we're seeing Bitcoin making this move to the upside. As you said, now back over these big numbers, it's 28,000. Then you start looking towards maybe it's 30,000, but they're looking for those big numbers. We get something like that, a move to the upside. I think these miners are going to explode even more.
Well, they're certainly worth keeping an eye on, folks. And right where we are is really resistance and or support, depending which side we get above it or below it. So keep that in mind for BTC, Bitcoin. All right, SDC, Pete, SmileDirectClub. Now, it isn't just teeth that need straightening out or fixing in this case. It is that they need straightening out. They're filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. That's not liquidation. That's let's reorganize and get back out of this. They had just a real problem with some of the, like Align, Pete, which is their big competitor, ALGN. And they were an investor, then they were an enemy, and then they were a frenemy. Now they're back to being an enemy, and the stock down 64%, SmileDirect.
John, this is a great example of what we talk about a lot of the time when we talk about certain stocks that are in a really bad spot. When you look at a company like this particular one, SmileDirect, and you look at their debt to cash, that's a big number, $850 million. When you look at their burn rate of about $80 million, that's another big number. When you look at the shorts, over 20%, that's another big number. All of this sort of just goes into the pot. When you think about it, go back to 2019. This was a $18 stock, John. You go to 2022, we're looking at a $2 stock. You start on this year somewhere closer to 41 cents, and now here we are at about 16 cents. There is a problem. They've had this problem, and when you look at that balance sheet, they haven't been able to get over the hump. And that's something we talk about here all the time on the Rebel's Edge is look at all those shorts. Look at the reasons why maybe those shorts are there. I think this is a great example of that. Interesting company for sure. And you talked about frenemies and enemies. I got to tell you something. Even a frenemy is an enemy. I don't trust them. So this was a problem for SmileDirect, no doubt. And that's why it's sitting where it is right now.
Down 88% from its highs, folks. Yeah. So that's pretty much it's done. How about Arch, Pete? Arch Coal. You and I have talked about this one a lot, but this isn't one of those steam coal plays. This is coking coal, which Pete would also say this is, metallurgic. This is what you use if you're going to be making steel. You need coking coal. That's what these guys are pulling up. And guess what? The demand just isn't there as much for this as it is for the ones used to heating that would run in power plants and so forth, Pete.
Yeah, that's where that coal, and you and I talk about it all the time. We talked about energy. Then we oftentimes we'll fold in a little bit on the nat gas front. But I think the reality is, and we've also talked obviously about uranium, but when you talk about coal, and you were all over this, John, I spoke about it today on television. I was talking about exactly that and how the Asian markets are the demand, and the demand is there at record levels last year and on pace to have another record year this year. But to your point, this is a different coal. This is coking coal. So when you look at this one, it did have a great run, however, John. When you look at the start of July, it was 109, got up to 170 just last week, and now today it's down, but it's trading about 148. This is another one. I'd at least keep an eye on this one. It's different. We're talking about Coca-Cola versus all the rest of the different types of uses that you've got it in energy space, electricity, and so forth. But it's still one where I think at some point they keep pulling back. It's not like they actually cut this thing and they said to themselves with this guidance that everything is terrible. They did talk about some challenges and they talked about some of the pricing, but they kept some of those numbers in line. So instead of going higher, they were back to the inline side. That's, I think, why people are selling. It might not be the right reason to be selling right now.
Yeah, that's, I think in the 130-ish area, Pete, if you're lucky enough, if it gets there, I think you do want to jump back into this one. So I join you. How about this, Pete? VFS. Now, this is VinFast. This is that company that was bigger than Ford and GM put together. They're a Vietnamese automaker, but these guys were really shrewd, Pete. They came public through, I believe, a SPAC. I can't remember if it was direct listing or SPAC, but they only brought like this much of it public, free trading, like nothing. So they could squeeze like crazy. Anybody dumb enough to short it was squeezed all the way up. But now it's down 90% since August. 90%. So when you see that they're going to bring, a whole bunch of shares to market because these guys wanted to say, hey, let me cash in. So they're trying to cash in now, but they're cashing in down 90%. So on paper, they were really rich. Now they're just a little rich.
This is where bad guys do the wrong thing and they got caught and the whole thing, right? We're talking about a stock, John, that traded from $9 to $90. And now here we are, it's trading at $10. So these insiders, they need to sell, they're going to sell. But boy, to your point, it's a lot different than it was not too terribly long ago when this stock was considerably higher. So it shows you, the pigs get fat, the hogs get slaughtered. They're going to make something, but it ain't even close to what they were thinking they were going to be making on this trade, John.
Yeah, this is, EV space out of Vietnam, great. I'm sure they're going to sell a lot of the vehicles that people need over there. And they might even export a few, Pete. They got to get past our safety standards, which is much tougher, I suspect. But, this was just, they tried to play a game. And it didn't really work out for them. It worked for a few days.
It worked for a while.
All right. What do you got as far as the NFL this week, Pete?
All right, John. So here's what we got for the NFL. We're about a quarter of the way through, right? Now we've played, 4 games. But I just wanted to throw out to you, it'd be kind of fun, to just talk about a little bit about, okay, who are the top 5 teams right now? Who's the worst team right now? Who's the most disappointing teams right now? So I'll give you disappointing with Cincinnati and the Chiefs. Now, I know the Chiefs are 3-1, but John, they got beat week 1 against Detroit. That was not supposed to happen. By the way, that was in Arrowhead. Then they actually go out there, and should the Jets have probably won that game
yes.
yesterday? Yeah, I agree with you. They just don't look like the Chiefs of last year to me. They just don't. There's been something there that just looks a little bit different. They're a little more vulnerable. Cincinnati, that's one where I just can't quite figure it out. They have one good week and then they go terrible. And then they have an okay week. I mean, I think Joe Burrow is one of the better quarterbacks in all the NFL, but they don't look all that great this year either. Your Chicago Bears are the worst team in football. Let's be honest. Those guys lost to the Denver Broncos, for God's sakes. I mean, you actually looked like a pretty good team for half of that game. And then the collapse started to come. But of the good teams, I'll give you right now, 49ers, unbelievable. Offense, defense, everything, right? Mm-hmm. I think the Lions are right after them. I think the Buffalo Bills after week 1 against the Jets. And you know what? Week 1, when you don't play in the preseason, that's understandable. You might have a great game, but you might not. Maybe you're not ready for it. And that's what I think Buffalo was. They just weren't ready for the game, John. Then you look at the Eagles and the Ravens. I think those are your top 5. But when you look at the 49ers, they pretty much are in the top 5 of just about every good category in football, offensively and defensively. So they are my number 1.
They're the team nobody wants to play. The Eagles are great, like you say, Pete, but nobody wants to play the 49ers. And yet, unfortunately, some of the lower teams in the league are going to have to play them. But the worst is the Bears, with Carolina very close second. And you know what? Denver is horrible too. The Broncos are horrible, and that's why we joked about it being relegated, that they should have to relegate the worst teams in the NFL, Pete, should have to be relegated down to indoor football or, into, spring league football or whatever, and bring up one of those other teams, because this team is terrible. The coaches are terrible. The defensive coordinator was having a breakdown, so he quit football altogether. Just said, I'm just not doing this anymore. I mean, the Bears are the worst. There's no doubt about that. And I agree with you about KC is not the KC of last year. Doesn't mean Mahomes can't pull it out. Kelsey's still very, very good. But, Taylor Swift is a distraction. All those commercials are a distraction. I will be shocked, Pete, if they can repeat. I think they'll get through to a fairly high level in the playoffs, but I don't know that they can repeat with this many distractions out there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. By the way, if you might not have seen this one, John, and I just decided to kind of gloss over it, but the XFL and the USFL have now merged. So could one of the better teams there beat the Chicago Bears, I guess.
Hell yeah.
I agree with you, by the way, because that's how bad they really might be. All right.
Pete, as long as Fields is anticipating where the receivers are going to go, even though he knows the route isn't sending them there, because he said that in the press conference yesterday. He said, well, he's supposed to float, and he did what he was supposed to, but I thought he might do this. And it's like, why?
They're having a hard time, John. We all know it. I mean, it's just a struggle. And I thought they could have improved with what they did in the offseason, what they did in the draft. They did not. And they got rid of a running back that's now a superstar with Detroit right in that northern. I mean, honestly, what in the world? All right. So next we're going to hit a little bit of college football, John. Now we're 5 weeks into the season here, right? Who do you think, who's separating away? And I'll give you one team that I think coming into this year, they were probably considered to be very good. But I think they're more than very good, but we'll find out this weekend. Texas. I watch that team. I see that quarterback. The quarterback looks like somebody who could be playing on Sundays. So that quarterback is great. The running game, pretty outstanding. They've got one guy who's just absolutely incredible. And then they've got 2 receivers and a tight end, John. So offensively, I think Texas could be one of these. I don't know. I guess they're not necessarily a sleeper, but everybody talks about Georgia. Everybody talks about Bama. Everybody talks about USC. By the way, USC more and more, even though they're winning and they're 5-0, they just don't do it in an impressive way. I don't know what's wrong with that team, but for all the talent they've got and a Heisman caliber quarterback and everything else, I can't quite figure them out, John. But so do you have any team that you think is a little bit of a surprise team out there? Maybe it's Oklahoma. I don't know. But who do you look at? Is it Ole Miss?
It is Ole Miss, Pete. I like the way Ole Miss plays. I like the way Oregon State mopped up on a really good team. Oregon State was tough. And, the Utes are usually a team that gives you a real fight. That wasn't the case this time. But, Pete, I texted you about, the tight end from Georgia, who was just a beast again. The guy's 6'4", 235, runs a 4.5 40, All-American, Maxwell Award winner. Or is it not the Max? Is it the Maxwell, Pete?
It's Mackey. Is it the Mackey? Yeah.
The Mackey Award winner last year. And it looks like he's going to do it again because that kid is just a beast. And he's one of the reasons that they escaped, because they could have lost. That was a really fired up Auburn team. But in terms of USC, I agree with you. Caleb threw for, I think, 6 touchdowns. But, we both know that the defense at my Colorado Buffaloes struggles, and especially without Sanders, Pete, because Shakur Sanders' brother wasn't back there on the defensive side because he has a kidney injury, and Travis Hunter had that liver injury, cheap shot. So, with those two not there, I think they're very vulnerable, and USC took advantage. I did see a real grit out of Shadur Sanders and the offense coming back to make it, basically a 7-point game, Pete.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting blown out, and they came back to make it, 41-48?
Right.
That was great. I mean, there was a lot to cheer about there, and Dion should be proud of the way those kids fought. It's also a little something. I have to give this to USC, Pete. When you go play at altitude, for any of you that have never put on pads and had to run under a hot sun at altitude, you get worn out in the first half. And USC looked like they were dragging in the second half, Pete. But of course, every team that plays at altitude has to deal with that. So it's not unique to them. But it looked like they ran out of gas.
Yeah.
But Texas, I think Texas, Florida State looks interesting. Washington looks great. And as you've already said, that quarterback, I think the Washington quarterback, Pete, is one to really keep an eye on, other than the Texas quarterback. Those are my top picks right now.
Yeah, my long shots, I shouldn't say long shots, but the teams outside of Texas that I love, you mentioned it. I mean, Washington, Michael Penix is unbelievable. The guy's got 16 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 75% completion. Not bad. Bo Nix, he's got 15 touchdowns, 1 interception, 80% completion, John. 80% for the year. This isn't just a single game. And then Oklahoma. This kid, Dylan Gabriel, is a stud. And that's the game, the Red River rivalry or whatever. These guys are going to be getting after it. That's Texas, Oklahoma. That's going to be a big one. That's this weekend. That should be pretty interesting. That's where Texas has to show if they truly are the team that I kind of think they might be. And if they're not, then maybe Oklahoma should be a little bit higher because they're undefeated and look pretty damn good. So we'll have to see as the weekend gets a little bit closer. I got one last one, which is the dark horse, Washington State. Be careful. These guys are undefeated. Mm-hmm. They can put up a lot of points, and they actually can play a little bit of defense on top of it. But they had a bye this past week, so they didn't play. They're still sitting at 3-0 or 4-0 or whatever. But that's a good football team. So I think that there's a lot of fun things going on in college football, and the Pac-12 is driving that fun.
Yep. Well, like I say, Pete, Oregon State really impressed me also. Yeah. I'm not saying they're a dark horse because they're a top 20 program right now. They're number 15, I think, this week. But that team played its heart out. And that was, just a very impressive win, I think. Again, against a team that beat USC twice last year. I know that was last year. It's not this year. But that's still a really good Utah team. And they made them look silly.
Yep. Great football team. They play great defense. They've been a little lacking on offense this year, but that Oregon State, John, that big kid from Clemson is running the offense pretty nicely out there, and they play pretty good on defense too. So they're doing everything right. The Pac-12 is dominating this year.
Yep. Well, they're going out in style, Pete.
Yeah.
All right, we're going out in style right now, folks. Make sure you check out marketrebellion.com/get started. If you'd like to get started in learning a little more about trading options, we have beginner, intermediate, and advanced courses. Encourage you to check that out. And Pete and I will be back tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Time.